Unappeased yearning. Yearning is defined as prolonged, unfulfilled desire or need, or a longing for something better than the present situation. And people yearn for various reasons. They yearn for finances, for some object, or for someone. Sometimes the longing can be quenched, but other yearnings stem from a place of nostalgia and will always remain unappeased. Most nostalgic yearnings express a sense that somehow everything in the past was kinder and gentler, a loss of innocence of days gone by. And in this present day, we no longer live in the age of innocence. When I was growing up, and I'm certain that some of you may be able to relate to this, I would hear my grandparents wax nostalgically about the good old days. According to them, the food was better and cheaper, neighbors were nicer and more trustworthy, and everyone's children were polite and well-behaved. Now, I always thought that kind of reminiscence was something only my grandparents did. However, I now realize that most people from that generation, the one that's called the greatest generation, do that kind of reminiscing. There are some specific characteristics about the greatest generation. They are the Americans who were civic-minded, valued hard work and sacrifices for the common good. In their day, family worship and prayer in public places was commonplace. The journalist Tom Brokaw argues that World War II generation's perseverance through difficult times is a testament to their extraordinary character. Moreover, it was their remarkable actions during times of war and peace that ultimately made the United States a better place in which to live. Born and raised in a tumultuous era marked by war and economic depression, Brokaw asserts that these men and women developed values of personal responsibility, duty, honor, and faith. These characteristics, he said, helped defeat Hitler, build the American economy, make advances in science, and implement visionary programs like Medicare. According to Brokaw, at every stage of their lives, this generation was part of historic challenges and achievements of a magnitude the world has never before witnessed. Now, while all of these facts may be true, Brokaw is also criticized for his nostalgia regarding this generation. You see, there is a continuum of timelines, and with each generational shift, the perception of what constitutes the good old days becomes those days of a generation past. Moreover, there is a dissonance between actually living the experience and the blurred reality of remembering. There is a narrowing of a vision that creates a yearning for what appeared to be a simpler time. Now, Nobel Prize winning psychologist Daniel Kahneman explains it like this. He says, our brain operates on two mental systems, and the experiencing self is the you in the moment who lives through the event, while the remembering self is the you that writes the history. I'm sure most of you have experienced some personal things in your family where you hear a story that someone's telling you, no, that's not how it happened. And then you have this discussion. It's like, well, I remember, yeah, but no, I was there. It really wasn't like that. So the you that writes the history is not the actual you that experienced it. So essentially, we're always reconstructing our memories, and the days that we remember fondly as those good old days possesses a seductive quality. But the yearnings can never be appeased because we cannot turn back the hands of time. I believe that everyone here is familiar with the first story in the Christian Bible about Adam and Eve. Their great crime was eating fruit from the tree of knowledge. And the Bible makes it very clear that once this happened, Adam and Eve were no longer innocent, because they then knew the difference between good and evil. They had been exposed to new information. They had gained knowledge. They were then banished from the Garden of Eden, thus setting humankind on a totally different course, lifetime after lifetime. More often than not, we tend to associate loss of innocence with our young and their exposure to information that's too advanced for their age. However, rather than centering on chronological age, loss of innocence is more about being exposed to new information in and of itself. Now, there are several heinous acts that occurred in this country over the past 50 years that dramatically began a spiraling down of American attitudes as a whole. The assassinations of President John F. Kennedy, Senator Robert Kennedy, and civil rights activist Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Their deaths began moving us further and further from the naivete that we collectively held. And then 9/11, that atrocity completed the shattering of a nation's innocence. We were no longer strangers to mayhem and devastation on American soil. The unthinkable has happened, and it's forever changed. We are no longer untouched, unspoiled innocence. The sense of security and the majority of us felt has waned. We can no longer hide our heads in the sand, believing that we are exempt from horrors that have always plagued other nations. We have come to understand, albeit reluctantly, that our perception of superiority will not keep us safe. We've been touched more fully by the depth of life, gaining knowledge. We have not been banished from paradise. However, we do see thorns attached to the fruit in our American Eden. Is it any wonder that Americans from generations past yearned for the good old days. The days when postage stamps for a first-class letter cost 3 cents. Desires were few, fresh vegetables in the summer and canned peaches in the winter. The bakery truck showed up once a week and the milkman delivered bottled milk with cream on top to the doorstep. Simpler and more peaceful sounding? Maybe. There were only 3 television stations on a good day. Most women hung clothes outside to dry in the fresh air. But there were no regulations regarding air pollution. So if you lived in a town anywhere near a factory, the clothes were often sooty after drying. Moreover, we were vulnerable in ways that we don't give a thought to now. The average age of Americans was much lower than it is today. The death rate from almost all diseases was higher because we didn't have the medical advances to deal with illnesses such as the polio epidemic. There was also blatant segregation of the races in the workplace, housing, and education. Tolerance of patriarchal oppression and economic inequity of women. It has now been just over a decade since I purchased my first cell phone. I did so with a mixture of pride and moving along the continuum of progress and also with some trepidation in adjusting to this totally foreign and new thing. However, since that time, my cache of electronics has expanded to include multiple devices. Each new device has become smaller and possesses a broader range of functions. The critics tell us we live in a world where it's easier to distance ourselves behind the electronic devices. We've heard horror stories about pedophiles who hide behind clever personas to prey on our children. Both men and women deceive through online dating sites, and people in increasing numbers use social media as a means of escape and isolation. While emails, cutting, pasting, and airbrushing makes deception easier, we know that instability and the fragility of our humanness attributed to social ills long before Steve Jobs created Apple. And Windows were just glass squares that we Windexed. We've always lived with attraction and repulsion, reason and emotional energy, love and hate throughout the existence of humankind. From these opposites spring what the religious call the duality of good and evil. So while you may find hashtag tweeting and the language of texting annoying, when disaster strikes on the other side of the world, there is an instant global connection. 3 Japanese students from the Graduate School of Global Environmental Studies at Kyoto University did a study on the utilization of social media in the East Japan earthquake and tsunami in 2011. What they found was that social media, such as Twitter and Facebook, served as a lifeline directly affecting individuals' means of information sharing, both inside and outside of Japan. It was a more effective way of locating displaced persons and providing information on damage. You see, geography no longer prohibits us reaching out to cultures on the other side of the world, any more than it prohibits anyone from finding like-minded people to revel in the spirit of Unitarian Universalism. Social media allows access through virtual churches like the CLF, the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Larger Fellowship. The CLF is one of the largest Unitarian Universalist churches in the world. It offers an online spiritual home through podcasts, video, and print for Unitarian Universalists, as well as unchurched spiritual seekers. In our current technological age, we're moving forward at an accelerated rate. In increasing numbers, more restaurants are installing mobile devices at diners' tables. From the classrooms to the coffee shops, we are now living in a tablet-friendly world. Based on the world of duality that we live in, we are continuously coexisting, both with relativity and obsolescence. But without opposites, there's no progression. It's responsibility of people in communities of faith to offer healing to our broken world. And the truth of deep religious impulse is that the knowledge we attain is born of science, reason, and adversity, while it also stands alongside the mystery. So rather than flailing and fighting technology with all of our might and reminiscing about the good old days, we must reach for deeper optimism, gaining new knowledge. #, may it be so.